So today I really want to look at the differences between a split squat and a lunge, because this came up on our exercise execution day where we ran through a lot of exercises, and the ones that kind of really were a little bit hazy were the differences between a split squat and a lunge. Now, to the mind's eye, they look very, very similar. However, they do completely different things. The split squat is way more quad dominant, okay, whereas the lunge should be way more glute and hamstring dominant. And I just want to show you today with Georgie the differences on execution and what we're looking for, and why one will be more quad dominant while the other will be more hamstring dominant. Okay, so first of all, we're going to look at the split squat. So Georgie's going to demonstrate a split squat here. Okay, so the heel's going to be on the up there, okay, which places more emphasis on the front leg. Now she goes down, okay, she's bringing this knee down and forward over the toe there, okay. So as you can see that, we're going to go down and forward, and she's pretty much straight at the hip, right? She's not bending forward too much. And when we emphasize coming down and forward, down here, down and forward at the knee, trying to cover the calf with the hamstring, what we're doing is we're increasing what's known as the moment arm around this joint, okay? So we're going to go down and forward, okay? And now she's loading up, and a lot of her weight is over her front foot here, okay? So she does it again, down and forward. Now another thing that you really need to think about is where the intent of the lift is coming from. So as Georgie goes down, okay, as she comes up, she's really thinking about pushing the foot, not just down on the floor, but down and forward on the floor. And that little bit of down and forward against the floor will really emphasize the quad, and you'll really feel it in the muscle working, okay? So that's the split squat, and that's kind of just a general overview of the split squat and how it's a little bit more quad dominant. So now we want to look at the lunge. Georgie shows a lunge, and we'll start with the reverse lunge, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So she goes down, she drives it up. Okay, so to the mind's eye, this looks quite similar to a split squat, especially if we're going to do a forward lunge. It looks very, very similar, but there's some subtle differences. Okay, and the big difference is when she goes back, notice she's flexing at the hip. Okay, so she's creating movement around this hip joint, and that is really, really key. So she comes back again, she's falling at the hip, and she's falling over so her chest is over her front leg, okay? And what that does, okay, you come down again, is we're now focusing the moment arm around here, okay? So a moment arm is basically the distance between the axis and either the working muscle or the load, okay? And the greater the moment arm, we can kind of theorize that the more a muscle around that moment arm will be working. So a good example of this is if Georgie goes down, as we see, if she's carrying the weight now, the weight is pretty much, okay, if we look at, this is the axis, this is where the hamstring and glutes working, and you've got this distance between kind of the axis and where the load's going to come down. Because if she uses dumbbells, this is where the load is. And we've got a very small one between the knee, okay, and the load there. So when we look at this, okay, we can increase the amount of work the hamstrings are doing by either leaning forward at the hips more and placing more load here, which will take more off the quad and put more on the hamstrings, or if we look at our split squat again, we can then put them more upright, okay, now the load's back here, so the moment arm between the load, so where the weight is, and the axis around the hip and hamstring here is very short, but around the quad there is very, very large. So depending on how we handle the weights and where they're placed will really dictate too on which muscle we're working. So if she shows you a split squat, let's look at a split squat again here. Okay, so a split squat's down and forward. So if you just remember, the split squat's more orientated around the knee. Okay, so you're breaking a lot more around the knee, which will make it more quad dominant. And the load is by the hips, so you've got this long moment arm here, so the quad's having to work more. Now, if we look at a lunge, okay, and I like to use a reverse lunge first, just so people can get in the habit of leaning forward at the hip, okay, to get some hip flexion there, okay. The load is now further forward of the body, so the hamstring and glutes are going to take more, and as she comes up, she comes then up into hip extension, okay. So, show us a couple of reps, Stu. So, she's broken at the hip there, not the lower back, that's key, and as she comes up, she's going to now think about pushing, or she's not going to think about it, she's going to be doing it, she's going to be pushing through the heel as she comes into hip extension. Because as we know, the glute and the hamstring are big hip extensors. So the more flex you can come over at the bottom, yeah, over like that, the more extension she's going to get up, and probably the more recruitment in the glute and the hamstrings. And we like to start with a reverse lunge first, and not a walking lunge, because if you can't, when you lunge, get into this habit here of breaking at the hip, then when you do a walking lunge, all that's going to happen is you're going to turn them into basic walking split squats, and they're going to be too quad dominant. So really the big differences between a split squat and a lunge are the placements of what's happening around the hip and the knee. So when we look at split squats, it wants to be way more knee dominant, okay? So thinking about knee over toe and slightly more upright with my weights closer to my hip there. And when I'm thinking about a lunge, okay, I want to be broken at the hip, flex forward, and my load wants to be further forward, so I'm getting a lot more coming through from the hip here than I am the knee. And then I drive up through the heel, squeezing your bottom and hamstrings. So they're your big differences. So next time you're in the gym, give them a whirl and see where you feel it. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.